Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the February 26th edition of the Divorce Support Club with me, Claire Macklin, and today I'm joined by Fiona Griffin. Fiona, would you like to very briefly introduce yourself just for anybody watching who hasn't met you yet?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I'm Fiona Griffin. I'm a family solicitor with Walker Family Law. And the reason that I'm here today is because, as part of my family law practice, I also deliver resolution together service to our clients.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And as I was saying before, I'm Claire Macklin. I'm a breakup and divorce coach. I work with Walker Family Law to help support their clients, both one-to-one coaching and through these webinars, which we do every month. So today we're going to talk about resolution together. Resolution together is quite a new thing in the divorce world. Most people, I wish I could say all people, but most people want to avoid a battle through their divorce, and they want to divorce with as much dignity as possible. So we thought it would be really good to do a whole session around resolution together, which is a model where couples can share one solicitor between them. And you'll also see it described as one couple, one lawyer sometimes. So I'm going to ask Fiona all the kinds of questions that people ask me, and that I then refer across to Fiona, and so that we can get as much information as possible for you on this particular process. So, first of all, for our listeners who perhaps haven't heard of this before, Fiona, can you tell us a little bit about Resolution Together, why it was introduced, and where it came from?
For those viewers that aren't aware of this, there is a national body of family solicitors called Resolution. And Resolution Together was launched by that national body resolution in autumn 2022. It came out of a growing call from both members of the profession and the general public who were looking for a regulated way for separating couples to seek legal advice together as a change from them going as individuals to separate and perhaps opposing legal teams. The programme that we now call Resolution Together was worked on by regulatory specialists from Resolution and also importantly from the Solicitors Regulation Authority, and they agreed the principles, standard and guidance by which we are allowed as regulated professionals to offer the Resolution Together service.
And can you tell us a little bit about um, kind of an overall, what's the overall experience of it? What's the main goal of Resolution Together?
So I suppose the overall goal will depend on where the couple are at when they come into the Resolution Together service. But the overall goal is that Resolution Together is one of a number of what we would call non-court dispute resolution options that a couple has to help them to resolve issues that have arisen from their separation. So whether that is issues to do with finances or issues with regard to the care of children, there are a number of non-court dispute resolution options available. Perhaps the most easily understood would be family mediation. I think family mediation is now sort of well known by a lot of people who are looking at separation options. And Resolution Together is another non-court dispute resolution option.
So it's one of these options that's there to help people separate with as little conflict as possible. That's what I'm
Absolutely.
hearing. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. So one of the questions that I imagine a lot of people ask you is, how do we know as a couple if we're a good fit for Resolution
Mm,
Together? How do we know that we're suitable for it and it is suitable for us?
absolutely. And this is really important because each couple's situation is obviously unique to them. And the when I talked earlier about the regulatory nature of the work that we do. As a solicitor, I have got to act within the Solicitors Regulation Authority Code of Conduct, and this says that I must act in the best interest of each client, and I must not act or continue to act where there's a conflict of interest or a significant risk of a conflict of interest. So there are some key criteria which anyone who's wanting to access resolution together has to meet. So I'm just going to take these off of a list that I have here so that I make sure I don't miss anything, because obviously this is vital. So these criteria are: number one, that the parties wish to resolve matters consensually and to receive advice jointly. Number two, that the parties have consented to sharing all relevant, including any confidential information. Number three, that there does not appear to be any imbalance of power, vulnerability, or other relevant factor which makes it inappropriate for the lawyer to advise both parties. And number four, the parties enter into a retainer agreement which confirms their informed consent for the lawyer to advise both of them. So, how we deal with this at Walker Family Law, um, uh, uh, as our director, Ian Walker, is also a family mediator, we decided to adopt good practice guidance provided by the Family Mediation Standards Board in developing our screening processes for
Mhm.
resolution together. Um, so we have an assessment meeting, and which is the first step for any clients who are interested in the Resolution Together programme. Once they know that they want to go ahead with Resolution Together, then we do the suitability meeting. And this is a one-on-one meeting, so it's done with each of the
Right.
couple separately. We can do it by teams as well as in person. That depends on the circumstances. And we use screening materials to assess suitability for resolution together.
Mm.
And once we've gone through that meeting, so if that meeting, for example, was with me, then I would use the screening materials to make a decision as to whether or not I thought resolution together was suitable, again, based on those criteria that I read out. And then we have also a peer review process in place, which sits behind that. So for any decision that I make, vis-a-vis a couple's suitability for resolution together, I then send that decision and all the screening materials to Ian, who, as my supervisor, he then reviews that decision, and we might
Mm.
have a conversation about different elements of, you know, this particular couple's unique circumstances, and so it's very, what I'm trying to get across, I think, is that it's a very um, stringent process
Mm.
because of the regulated nature of the work that we do as lawyers.
Yeah.
And it's really important, of course, that resolution together is safe and appropriate for anybody who's wanting to take part in it. And
Yes.
it's not just a one-off. So after each joint meeting, if we do go into resolution together, after each joint meeting, there's a continual reassessment. So I would reflect on and ensure any risk assessment is up to date following each joint meeting. So as I say, heavily regulated, but we're lucky that, as I say, Resolution and the SRA were able to work on setting out a scheme that we could use and remain within our regulations.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's really clear. It sounds as though the main thing for couples who might be watching is that this is a kind of they need to be coming into this with the right kind of not right they need to be coming into this with an approach that they're going to share information, that they're
Mm,
going to participate fully in the process, and then you will keep an eye on that all the time, because as we know, things might crop up part way through. So one question that came to my mind while you were talking was, do we have to be agreed on everything as a couple before we embark on this process, or can we use this process to come to agreement about things?
Yeah, that is certainly one of the questions that I get asked a lot. And what I would say is that no, there's no expectation that you're going to come into resolution together having a fully formed agreement. And in fact, if you did have a fully formed agreement, you might think, well, why on earth do I need resolution together? One of the points of resolution together is to help you to work through and find the agreement. But the
Mm.
important thing is that you come in with a clarity of purpose, that you know that you want to work together, and each of you are able to respect the fact that everybody is working on this challenge together rather than taking oppositional positions.
Yes, yeah. So very different to the sort of traditional view of the divorce process as adversarial, isn't it? It's much
Yeah,
more a team effort. This,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. You mentioned in your list of criteria some of the things that would make resolution together the wrong choice for a couple. Can you tell us a little bit more, just about very briefly about some of those things? So you said a sort of imbalance of power, those kinds of things. How do those sometimes show up?
So, through the screening process is in depth, because resolution together is not going to be suitable where domestic abuse has or is taking place. So, the sorts of questions that we ask lead us to understand if there is any imbalance of power between the couple, particularly things like where any individual has not got any access to information, such as financial information, or suspects the other party is hiding financial information, and where either of the couple feel that they are being compelled or coerced or pressured into choosing resolution together. So we also look at any issues of mental or emotional health, including any issues with addiction or risk-taking behaviours. So yeah, it is quite an intrusive. I will be honest with you, it is quite an intrusive suitability assessment that has to take place.
Yeah.
Um, and then if we find that it's not resolution together isn't suitable, then obviously the way that's confirmed is very important. So we would always inform the more vulnerable party first, and would discuss with them how they could protect themselves, signpost them to appropriate resources, and also agree with them how we can notify the other party that resolution together is not going to be appropriate without increasing any risk of harm to them.
Yes, I imagine that could be of significant concern for somebody who was feeling perhaps that they were being coerced into this, or there was a history of abuse in the relationship. So
Absolutely.
everything that I'm, I'm going to, I've made an assumption. I'm just going to check it out with you. That everything that's said in that second meeting, where you have each party individually, is that all confidential? That
Absolutely,
between you and
yes.
them? Yeah,
So absolutely. So resolution together, once we get into the work of it, is a three-way conversation at all times.
right.
But prior to that, the suitability assessment is entirely confidential. That's right.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Um, so into some of the more sort of practical elements of this, and around kind of how it works. So I think you've just answered my first question, which was around are all the meetings joint with both of us, or are some of them individual? It sounds as though they're all joint from once you embark on the process.
That's right. So we offer an initial call with anybody who is interested in resolution together, just as a fact-finding call. Um, we can either do that jointly or we can do that individually, entirely their choice. Then we have the suitability meetings, which, as we've said, are one-on-one, and then we go into the joint meetings. And after that, from that point onwards, all of the meetings are joint. All of the correspondence is joint.
Okay, fantastic. And how long does the process usually take from start to finish? I know the divorce process is sort of 6 months minimum anyway, because of the cooling off periods and so on. But how long is this process generally?
It's a bit of a piece of string question, to be honest. It will obviously depend on where people are at when they come into the process.
Mm,
Some clients, may have agreed most things and just want a sense check of what's been agreed, and some clients are at a very much earlier stage. So I think the minimum is usually two joint meetings. So a first joint meeting to have that sense check, and then a second one to complete any paperwork. Um, Resolution together, we do insist on a 14-day cooling off period. So if they come into the first joint meeting having that sense check because they've basically reached an agreement, then there would be a 14-day cooling off period where they have the opportunity to take independent legal advice or make any checks that they want to make
mm,
before we ask them back to sign any documents. But more typically, for a couple who are working with us to reach an agreement, you're probably going to be looking at 3 or 4 meetings
mm,
tends to be typical. But of course, the times between those meetings might vary. So they might vary for the reasons that people just need some time to process what's happened in the previous meeting, or they might vary because we're waiting for further advice from, say, a pension expert
mm.
or a financial neutral, for people to get advice about their mortgage capacity. So there might be homework that's being done, in between those meetings.
Yeah. And I guess that sometimes there might be financial documentation to pull together and all of those things that arise out of that first meeting. Um, so another question that I sometimes hear is, how much financial disclosure is required for this process? How much financial disclosure do we have to give? Can it be very high level or does it need to be very, very detailed?
That's something that we always discuss with the clients because, again, it's going to depend on the nature of how they ran their finances. If their finances were very joint through the relationship and they both have good oversight of those finances, there's no need for them to each download 12 months bank statements for the accounts that they've already seen. Um,
Mm,
so we don't do that, but full and frank financial disclosure is still very important. It's important that both parties come into um, resolution together or develop, as the resolution together process goes on, a full understanding of the financial landscape, because without it they can't make um, long-term financial decisions. So
mm,
is how we do that is going to really depend what each couple finds appropriate and comfortable for them. Some couples that I work with will share all of the information that they each feel they need before a first joint meeting, and then they will come to me with a summary
mm,
confirming that, yes, I've seen all the information that stands behind these figures. I know that I'm happy with it. Or it might be that questions are teased out as we start to discuss the finances in resolution together, and then further documents and information are brought into the
mm.
meetings.
So it sounds very flexible as a process.
Yeah, and it's there to work with people rather than,
Mm,
requirements as you would get in traditional litigation where people are required to provide set pieces of information at set times. This is very much up for the parties themselves to work out the agendas and to work out what they need to help them to reach the agreements.
yeah, and where you've got a couple who are who have that mindset of working on this together and as a team, then it enables that couple to feel like they have control over this process, I think,
Yeah,
doesn't it? Because they can influence how it goes and how the sessions are organized and all of that, which
yeah.
sounds
I
great.
mean, absolutely. So what we're doing is we're working in a problem-solving way.
Mm,
So we're not
yeah.
looking at win-lose scenarios. It's not a positional negotiation, it's problem solving.
Mm,
And really that's trying to find win-win solutions. And of
yeah.
course, a win may be financial, but it may not be measured in monetary terms as well. There are lots of reasons why, you know, couples want to use resolution together, and those reasons are totally disconnected with financial gain or loss.
Absolutely. One of the ones that comes up often when I'm working with clients who are using this process is that they want to ensure that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, they can look back and know that they were very respectful of each other and they perhaps have children and they need to carry on co-parenting together. And this is a very productive way to be able to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, you mentioned mediation earlier, and I'm interested to know what are the differences then between this and mediation because they sound similar in some ways.
So, the key difference really is that in mediation, the mediator can't provide legal advice. Now, a lot of family mediators are also family lawyers, but when they're wearing their mediator hat and working with a couple in mediation, they cannot offer legal advice. In resolution together, again, because of the nature of the regulatory system that it's been set up under, we are a one lawyer, one couple. So it is the legal advice that people are coming into resolution together to benefit from. Um, the other thing is that at the end of a mediation, the mediator will produce a document called a memorandum of understanding. That's not a binding document, but it gives the parties the opportunity to then go and get legal advice and get legal documents drawn up. At the end of resolution together, if the parties have opted for this, and most do, we can draw up the legal documents, the consent order, where that's appropriate in the context of divorce proceedings, and we can file it with the court, and we notify the court that we're just doing that as the solicitors who are only on record for the purposes of filing the consent documents, and then of course that is legally binding.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Um, and you mentioned earlier about, well, you've mentioned it a couple of times actually now about independent legal advice. So, um, and I hear this question a lot too. Is it okay to go away from a meeting in resolution together and get some independent legal advice around some of the things that you've discussed or maybe agreed?
It is totally okay, yes.
Mm.
And where people find that supportive, it's a really good idea for them to do that because if particularly if they've, if the resolution together discussions have got a little bit stuck, it
Mm.
might just be the thing that helps people to unstick themselves in that way. But yes, it's totally fine.
Brilliant. And how much does all of this cost? It's always a fundamental question that people want to know the answer to.
Always a fundamental question, absolutely. So at the moment, we don't offer resolution together under a fixed fee arrangement. So it is based on hourly rate work. The having said that, the suitability meeting is based on our fixed fee, and that is available from our client services team. They can talk to people about the fees involved.
Mm.
Um, so that said, the resolution together work is going to be charged on the basis of the hour time that the solicitor spends working with the couple.
Yeah.
Um, as we do with all cases, we send people a monthly invoice, and that shows the work that has been done in that month. Um, if a couple are looking at resolution together, we can always look at agreeing some parameters about around the cost, of course, and how to budget for it. What I can say is that, of course, I think it stands to reason that for the vast majority of people, resolution together is going to be a cheaper way forward than both instructing solicitors. But my caution would be not to use it simply because you think it's going to be cheaper. It has to be the right fit for all the reasons
Yes.
that we've already talked about.
Yes. Yeah. If it's not the right fit, then it's likely to fall down, and then you'll need to revert back to one of the other procedures anyway, which actually in
Yeah,
the long run may increase your costs, of course.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Um, what other professionals might be involved to kind of around the outside of this process in your experience? What other professionals do you often call in?
Yeah, so some key ones would be people like a financial neutral. They're going to provide financial advice to the parties when you're looking at lifetime resource planning, maybe putting
And
some
would they,
investments.
yeah, and that's like the one solicitor, one couple, is that one financial advisor, one couple? Is that what the neutral means there?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So we work with financial neutrals who are also resolution accredited, and so they would come in to advise the couple, usually in a resolution together meeting, so that there's four people in the meeting, three of us having the advice from the financial neutral. Maybe a pension on divorce expert if the parties have got pensions to be considered. And again, in the way that we would work there is we would put together a letter to send off to a pension expert and then get a report and consider that together. And of course, people like yourself, Claire, and indeed you personally,
Yeah.
as a divorce coach, very important side to all the legal work we do is the emotional support side, because no matter how amicable and problem-solving focused people are, of course, we're talking about the end of a relationship, and that is an emotional time. So having the right emotional support in place is very important to make it successful.
Yeah, and that support isn't always joint in the same way.
Oh no,
Um,
no.
I just want to make that really
Yeah,
clear
of
as well.
course.
Certainly,
Yeah,
I don't ever work with both parties in a couple, but because emotional regulation is so important here, it's one of the biggest components to this being successful, isn't it? You know, if you are um, if you're looking at embarking on this, but you don't feel that necessarily you are emotionally ready for it, then there is perhaps time to take a pause, seek some support from a coach or a therapist to help get into the place where you feel you can handle this journey.
yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
I wanted to ask you some questions about some of the sort of worries and fears that people might have. Um, so the first thing that I hear quite often is, my partner really wants to go down this route, but I'm really, really not ready for this process at all. And this is what I was talking about just now. Often one person in a couple is not ready yet
Mm,
to enter into the divorce process at all. I remember you saying when we were first talking about this webinar, because just because resolution together isn't an option because one of you isn't ready, don't then go straight to one of the other options for divorce because that party won't be ready for that either. So my advice would always be if one of you is not ready to start the process at all, then give it some more time. Um, Take some emotional support um, rather than going to another solicitor to get a second opinion or go down a different route. And I don't know what advice you would give in that scenario, but
yeah,
often
so
people are at different points on the journey, aren't they?
totally. Of course
Yeah,
they are. Yes, yeah. So if we're addressing there the person who doesn't feel that they're ready,
yeah,
then the you know, what I would recommend is the things that we've touched on in previous webinars really is how to put that team around yourself so that you feel supported, perhaps working with a divorce coach to get your confidence up in the separation. Look at your various options, of course, but what I would say, because I do work, outside of resolution together, I work as a litigation solicitor in family litigation. Don't use a solicitor for that. That's my main message. Is solicitors are really rubbish and expensive counsellors. Don't use us for that. Um, get proper advice and support from somebody who knows what they're talking about in that space. For the other person, I think sometimes this is where really the difficulty sits is with the other person who does feel ready and wants to, get
yeah,
going, wants to sort things out. And frustrations can build, and I think it's important that we also recognise that. So for that person, um, I would say that, with my traditional solicitor litigation hat on, you're not going to get any better outcome by forcing the other person down a litigation route. Yes, you might get a court timetable in place and things like that, but you are heading for a costly um, and difficult process. Sometimes it's the only way, but I think if there is a chance that you can wait just a little bit longer, give the other person time to catch you up in terms of emotional readiness, and then use an on-court dispute resolution process, whether it's resolution together or one of the others. But don't close off your options to that just because you're frustrated that the other person isn't quite where you are.
Yes, absolutely. And I work with some clients in that position as well. So, um, and when you're the person who has chosen to ask for the divorce or to go down that road, um, it can be, you have spent probably a long time getting to that point.
Mhm.
Often the clients that I work with have spent maybe months, no, even years, sometimes even decades getting to that point of saying those words, and the other person may be a long way behind. So yes, this is about, I suppose, seeing the journey from in the other person's shoes
Yeah,
as well, isn't it? So putting yourself in the other person's shoes and thinking about how this feels from where they're standing. And if you want to use resolution together, then it's going to work much better if you can just wait a little while for the other person to catch up, at least you know,
yeah. I
part of
mean,
the way to join you.
absolutely. I mean, thinking about that suitability criteria again, it's
Mm.
unlikely that if there's a real imbalance in where people are at emotionally, that you're actually going to pass that suitability assessment anyway for resolution together, because emotional readiness or lack of could look like coercion or duress or something like that when we do the assessment. So
Yeah,
it's important to
emotional.
take that into account.
Yes, and I think that not being emotionally ready can also look like not engaging in the process,
Mm,
can't it? So, when you're not emotionally ready, it's very difficult to pull your financial documentation together, to even contemplate going to sit in a round table meeting with you as a solicitor and your ex-partner. Those things
absolutely.
become really challenging, and then quite often what people do perhaps is bury their head in the sand and sort of it's that first stage of the grief process, sort of denial and
Mm,
shock.
yeah.
And so you're much better to wait for the other person to move through that phase and come out the other side of it and catch you up a little. The other thing that comes up quite a lot is the question of how you give legal advice to both people without favouring one of them, or without seeming as though you're sort of taking sides, or how do you handle that? How do you deal with that?
So luckily, resolution, as in the national body resolution, they do require us to undergo mandatory training before we can offer resolution together, and so this is something that we're trained to do. Um, but yes, it is very different to the way that we would traditionally work. I think the important thing is that what we're aiming to do is reach an agreement that would be appropriate and the court is likely to approve. So what I'm advising in the resolution together is, well, if this dispute, one person saying one of you says one thing, one of you says another thing, if we took that to a judge, what do I think a judge would be likely to do with that dispute? And I base my advice on that. So it's a straight down the middle sort of. We're just looking at, what are the risks and of litigation? Where might a judge come in on this question? Um, and
Yeah. So you've kind of got a very almost a position of standing back and sort of overseeing everything, haven't you?
yeah,
I think in there.
yeah, that's
Mm.
that's what we're doing. We're not. because we're problem solving, I think it comes back to that. We're problem solving. We're looking at the challenge of the separation with a problem solving lens. We're not looking at it in a win-lose
Yeah,
way.
you have a
Yeah.
very different hat on in this process, it sounds,
I
to,
mean,
in the traditional
sort of,
adversarial process.
sort of, but then as family lawyers, and certainly as resolution accredited lawyers, that's what we're doing anyway. A lot of the time is looking at how do we, even if when we're just working with one client, we're looking at how do we problem solve this? How do we get them a solution? And it has to be one that the other party is going to agree to if we want to avoid litigation, which as resolution members we want to do anyway. So it's different,
Yeah.
yes, but not as different as you might imagine.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, so there's another issue that comes up around um, sort of fear of the meetings and the process. So people being worried that perhaps they might freeze in the sessions or not know what to say, or perhaps get really upset in the sessions, or a fear that their ex-partner is much more confident than them, perhaps in those kinds of environments. Um, how do you make sure that you hear both of the people in the room, where perhaps one is more outgoing or more talkative than the other?
Yeah, again, it comes down to the training. Um, this is one of the key things that we're taught to watch out for, and make sure that the conversation is as even-handed as possible, checking in with the person who appears to be perhaps the quieter party, perhaps more regularly. Um, and although the conversations in resolution together are a three-way conversation, it doesn't prevent us from having one-to-one conversations. So the parties could agree that they can have one-to-one conversations with me if there's any sort of procedural things that they want to talk about. So, how meetings are structured, the time length of meetings,
Yes,
is it comfortable that I check in with you like this, etc., etc. So all those sorts of things we can
yes,
account for. Yeah.
yes. So I mean, I'm just thinking about a client that I was working with recently who was in this process and was really concerned about um, they felt that they weren't necessarily able to say what they wanted to say. They in our sessions, they could absolutely vocalize what it was they wanted to say, but they found it very, very difficult in the sessions themselves to be able to stand up. And their sort of their quietness, they were worried that their quietness would be seen or interpreted as agreement
Mm,
to what was happening. So
okay.
we did quite a lot of working through the different scenarios, what the points were that they wanted to say, and then practicing them. So we did quite a lot of role
Mm,
play, and we rehearsed and we put together a whole sheet of different, almost like lines, that my client wanted to be able to say when they went into the sessions. And I think that's, approaching it like that, sort of very methodically, can be really helpful. Um, and you can spend time perhaps sitting with a friend or speaking those words out loud in front of a mirror, and those kinds of things, because your brain is really clever, and your imagination and your memory are very interlinked and fire the same kind of neurons. So when
yeah.
you have practiced saying things you want to say often enough, when you come to say it in real life, your brain will it will be familiar, and your brain will think you've already done it, and it will be much
Yeah.
easier then to say those things. So those are the kinds of things that I can help with alongside the
Absolutely.
work that you're doing,
Yeah.
to
It's
help clients
also
feel ready.
Yeah, and it's also fine for clients to send emails as well. So, if it's easier for somebody who's feeling a little bit like that, working in resolution together, um, they can email their resolution together advisor and say, I know we're going to discuss this in the next meeting. These are the things that I want you to be aware of from my point of view, and then we could reflect on that in the next joint meeting.
Yes.
And then it sort of becomes more of a conversation
Mm,
with the resolution together advisor, participating in that and perhaps teasing out that information
yeah.
because they've had the heads up about it.
Yes. That's actually something I get asked about quite often. Is it okay for me to email the lawyer who's acting for us in this in outside of the sessions. So
Mm,
that's really helpful. Um, there's another fear around, I think, what happens if process breaks down, or what happens if there is one aspect of our separation that we just can't reach agreement on, and we seem to be going around in circles, or we've got stuck, or we're at an impasse. What
yeah,
happens then? Does the whole process fall apart?
no. And that's one of the key things, isn't it? Because I'm sure that's a very real fear
Yeah.
for people coming into the process. No, it doesn't. So if we're working away, but we're unable to reach an agreement, as you say, because there's one sticking point, then there's a few options. You We could bring in more advice, the financial neutrals, etc., that we've talked about. We can, on top of that, we could look at something called early neutral evaluation, which is where we choose a family law barrister and who's independent of the process, and we send them details of what we're stuck on and ask them for their overview and advice on what they think a judge might do in the event that that part of the dispute came before a judge. And then we use that feedback to try and overcome any impasse. Um, that would work within resolution together, and then the parties could agree to step outside of resolution together and perhaps move to a collaborative law model where each party has their own family lawyer, um, or they could move to an arbitration, which is where they agree to appoint an arbitrator just to deal with the point that they're stuck on. So all of those things are still what we would call non-court dispute resolution. They're not involving a litigation process. They're still
Mm,
ways of working that respect the fact that this couple want to try and reach an agreement wherever possible.
mm. No, that's really interesting. And if it if if you get to the point where it you go off and you move towards the collaborative law process, for example, would though and you each went to having a lawyer separately, would you need then to appoint completely different lawyers, or would you be able to carry on in some capacity?
It would depend on um, what's happened and what the circumstances were. I haven't personally had this happen. I think
Mm,
my reaction is probably to say no. I think they would need to have independent collaborative lawyers at that point. But we could, of course, discuss and agree on what information from the resolution together discussions was going to feed into their collaborative work so that it wasn't a complete fresh start and didn't feel quite so scary.
mm.
And obviously, try and mitigate some of the costs wherever possible by agreeing what information and what discussions that we've already had and where are we stuck could then feed into the collaborative process.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Um, so one another question that I get asked sometimes is that particularly when somebody's working with me alongside, are we allowed to bring anybody else to meetings? Am I allowed to bring a friend or somebody to support me along to those meetings? Have you ever had that happen?
I haven't, and that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Um, I, as a resolution together advisor, I wouldn't see that I would object, but of course I've got to take into account the other person's thoughts and
Yes,
feelings around that. Um,
that might be something that you'd need to discuss perhaps
we
in
would have
if
to,
yeah, if
yeah,
one person was really struggling with it, we're maybe back into the sort of realm of one person not being as ready
yeah. And I mean,
as the other.
I think I'm struggling to see that if one person feels like that is resolution together really appropriate for them.
Mm,
Um, I
yeah,
think that we would have to think very carefully about the suitability criteria at that point, definitely.
yeah, yeah. No, that's really interesting. Um, I know you said just now that you've never had a resolution together kind of fall apart. So I think it would be really helpful to know a little bit more about perhaps some of the success stories that, some of the stories that you've got of where this has worked really, really well and how people have emerged the other end, and how they feel perhaps at the end of the process.
Yeah.
It's really encouraging that you have never had it break down. Um,
Yeah.
so how do most people end up, um, at the end of this process? And can you tell us a few, perhaps a few stories, obviously without
Yeah, of
identifying
course.
anybody?
I think the one theme that I get from a lot of my clients using resolution together is the gratitude that this system is now available. I think it's been a long time coming, and so the ability of people to have their legal needs met in this way is really, people are really grateful that it is a service that's available to them. Um, I think that. Uh, in the lots of cases, couples who are co-parenting after separation find resolution together really supportive. I'm working with a couple at the moment who have said to me, we've chosen this because we just want to model for our daughter how mum and dad can work this out together, in a very responsible and very caring way, that we still do care about the outcomes for the other person. And we want to model that behavior, which
Yeah,
is just lovely,
it's
isn't
fantastic
it?
role model, isn't it? For
Yeah,
and I talk about this a lot with my clients. What you do now and how you are through this process is really modeling to your children how to resolve conflict and how to deal with difficult situations and how to handle challenge.
yeah,
Isn't it? And
yeah.
that's exactly what you've just described,
And
and
and for
working as a team.
yeah, and for children to know
Mm.
that their parents can still do that, and that
Yeah.
they are going to, that they must feel so much more secure, knowing that their parents are working things out in this way.
Mm.
Um, and then there are some situations, and I know I've worked with clients where, one person is a little bit more nervous about what the financial outcome looks like, but because we're able to bring in outside advice and they're able to get legal advice, I've worked with a couple where they were looking at how to deal with a couple of properties that they had, and looking at the wife staying in the property and then receiving actually the bulk of the proceeds of sale because of other assets that the parties had. And helping her to understand how that was going to look, what that new financial outlook was going to be, in a
Yes.
way that enabled her to reach an agreement, that if they had litigated that, would have been, 6 to 12 months worth of battle
Yes.
potentially
And
because of the
stress.
issues at play and stress. And they'd already, had some life difficulties that they really wanted to make this part of their lives as stress-free as it possibly could be. And although the meetings were tough at times, we were able to navigate that with that financial advice on board as well.
Mm.
So,
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a brilliant addition to the kind of suite of products effectively that you
mm.
can use to help people through this really difficult time. Um, is there anything else that you would like to, or that we haven't covered, that you would like anybody listening to know or understand before we sort of wrap up?
Um, just simply that if anybody's got any queries or wants to make an inquiry, we're always happy to have a no obligation call, particularly, with regard to resolution together, because it is a new thing. It's not well known, and people have very, very unique and different circumstances. So I'm always happy to offer a free call, and we can chat through to help people decide whether to even broach the subject of resolution together with the other person. And yeah, so because that's a big decision in of itself sometimes. So
Yes.
always happy to answer any questions that anybody's got.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Fiona. There's a huge amount of detail, and I'm sure that all our listeners will find it really, really helpful. I certainly have. I've learned some things so that I didn't know. So
Good.
thank you very much for your time, and also for your expertise. And we will be back next month. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Claire.